Starlight filters through the leaves onto an ancient figure waiting in the glade. I am Elrond, and I have kept these tales for many long years. Tonight, I will share with you the complete origin story of the elves, from our first awakening to our final voyage into the West. You will understand how our joys and sorrows shaped the very world you know. Whispers speak of a time when the world was young and silent, and of the shadow that fell upon our first starlit home. I would be grateful to know where in the world you are listening from, and what the hour is there. What memory of the elves lingers in your heart? They awoke to the gentle lapping of water and a sky filled with unknown stars. The first elves opened their eyes not to a dream, but to a world of profound stillness beside the lake of Cuiviénen. Their first actions were simple, instinctive. Fingers touched the cool water, tracing ripples that spread out into the dark. Eyes lifted to the brilliant points of light above, and in that moment, a deep and unbreakable bond was forged. They were children of starlight and water, and their hearts were filled with a quiet, overwhelming wonder. This wonder soon became a need to understand, to explore the shores of their awakening, and learn the language of the whispering reeds and the sighing trees. Yet for all its beauty, the world was vast and deeply silent. A subtle apprehension lingered at the edges of their minds, a quiet fear of the shadows between the distant trees, of the sheer scale of the unknown that pressed in around their small, lit corner of the world. It was a tension between their boundless curiosity and the profound mystery they found themselves within. Faced with this immense, silent land, they made a choice that would define their nature for all ages. They chose not to wander blindly into the dark, but to remain. They decided to build their first community there, on the shores of the lake that had given them their first sight and sound. They would learn from the water and the stars, from the earth beneath their feet, and from each other. This decision to create a home, to live in harmony with the world rather than conquer it, cemented their identity as a people of peace and profound connection. The stakes of this choice could not have been higher. It was the very foundation of their soul. Their bond with Cuiviénen and the stars above grew deeper with every passing night, but it also set them apart, making their gentle light all the more visible against the encompassing darkness. And as their community began to flourish by the water, a new presence was already stirring, one that would arrive to change their peaceful fate forever. Into that silence came a sound that was not water or wind. It was a music of such power and clarity that it seemed to cut through the very air, a resonant call from a horn that was not of their world. Then he appeared, a figure of immense stature astride a great steed, his form seeming to gather the starlight around him. This was Oromë, the huntsman of the Valar, and his arrival shattered the quiet world the elves had known. He did not thunder into their midst, but rather halted at the edge of their gathering, his presence both magnificent and deliberately restrained. He dismounted, and instead of speaking, he took from his side a great harp. The music he wove then was not a hunter's challenge, but a language of forests and distant, sunlit realms. It was an offering, a bridge of sound built to span the unimaginable gap between their newborn wonder and his ancient, divine power. The elves were caught between overwhelming awe and a deep, instinctive wariness. Here was a being who held the light of creation in his eyes, who offered songs of a land without shadow. For some, this was the answer to a longing they had not even known how to name, a call to a destiny far greater than their quiet lakeshore. For others, the memory of the dark and silent world was a known quantity, a safety they were reluctant to trade for the terrifying majesty of this stranger. Could such immense power truly be benevolent? Was the light he promised worth the peril of the journey he hinted at? Their unity, so recently forged, was tested by this single, profound encounter. It fell to their first leaders, the ones who had guided them in their early days of discovery, to make a choice. They looked from the faces of their people, alight with a new and hungry hope, to the towering form of Oromë, who waited with a patience that felt as deep as time itself. Their decision was not made from fear, but from that most elvish of traits, an unquenchable thirst for understanding. They chose to listen. They gathered around the Vala, and he spoke to them of Valinor, the land of the gods across the sea, where the trees of light, silver, and gold lit a world in an eternal, blissful day. He spoke of a place where they would be welcomed, where their own light could grow untroubled by any shadow. The invitation hung in the air, beautiful and terrifying. The stakes of their simple life by the water were irrevocably raised. To accept meant to leave behind the very shores where they had first drawn breath, to trust a being whose power they could scarcely comprehend, and to venture into a vast world they knew nothing of. It was a risk that threatened to sunder them, pitting the longing for safety and the familiar against the irresistible lure of a promised paradise. With Orm's words still echoing in their hearts, the elves faced a division that would shape their kindreds for all the ages to come. So the first steps were taken, a slow, hesitant procession away from the starlit water and into the vast, trackless dark of Middle-earth. They moved not as a fleeing herd, but as a people, their chieftains guiding them with a quiet authority born of shared purpose. They organized themselves, the strong helping the weak, the swift scouting ahead to find the safest paths through the rising mountains and dense, whispering forests. This was not a conquest of the land, but a careful negotiation with it. Every hand offered to help another over a treacherous river crossing, every shared moment of rest under the unfamiliar constellations wove a new, stronger bond among them. Their resilience was not a loud defiance, but a quiet, persistent light in the face of an immense and often hostile world. The very earth seemed to test their resolve. Jagged mountain passes tore at their feet, and bitter winds howled with a voice that held no music. In the deep shadows of the woods, they sometimes felt a watchful presence, a malevolence that was more felt than seen, a lingering echo of the darkness Oromë had warned them of. These hardships forged them, but they also planted the first seeds of doubt. Was this relentless struggle the price of paradise? Had they traded the known peace of their home for a promise that might yet prove empty? Their commitment to the Valor's guidance was an act of faith that required immense courage each day. The fate of their entire people now rested on this single, perilous trek, and every league westward deepened that staggering responsibility. Yet as the land tested their bodies, a subtler division began to test their spirits. They reached the foothills of a mountain range, so vast its peaks were lost in a veil of cloud. The journey had been long, and the path ahead promised only greater hardship. It was here, at the feet of these colossal peaks, that the first great division took root. A large group of the elves simply stopped. Their feet, which had carried them so far from the lake of their awakening, would carry them no further. They looked up at the forbidding stone, hearing the mournful wind howl through the high passes, and their hearts, once filled with the music of Oromë, were now filled with a cold and certain dread. They voiced their fears openly, a chorus of anguish rising against the determined silence of their leaders. This was not the promised paradise, they argued, but a treacherous land of stone and shadow. To cross these mountains felt like a betrayal of the very world that had given them life, a step into a domain of giants where their gentle light would be extinguished forever. A deep and painful schism tore through the host. On one side stood those still driven by the hope of Valinor, their eyes fixed on the distant western horizon. On the other stood those bound by a profound fear of the unknown, their spirits tethered to the familiar lands of Middle-earth. It was an emotional conflict that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their people. The leaders of the journey, who had shepherded them this far, faced an agonizing choice. They could force their kin to continue, fracturing their community with resentment, or they could abandon the divine summons and remain together in the wilderness. After a period of intense sorrow, the choice was made. The leaders, with heavy hearts, chose to press on, leaving their kindred behind. It was a decision that sacrificed immediate unity for a promised destiny, a painful severing that would echo for all time. Those who refused the mountains became known as the Avari, the unwilling. They turned away from the light of the west and faded into the vastness of Middle-earth, their stories becoming whispers in the deep woods and forgotten valleys. Those who continued, now called the Eldar, the people of the stars, took the first steps onto the steep mountain paths, their unity forever broken, but their purpose painfully clarified. The stakes of this Sundering were the future of the elven races themselves, setting their kindreds on divergent paths that would shape the history of the world. As the Eldar descended the western slopes of the mountains, their trial was not over. Before them lay a new and formidable barrier, a forest so ancient and dense its canopy blotted out the stars, a realm of deep shadows known as the Great Greenwood. The Great Greenwood was not a barrier of stone, but one of living, breathing wonder. Its canopy was a ceiling of emerald leaves, and its air hummed with a music more ancient than their own. For the Teleri, this was not a place of fear, but a home they had not known they were seeking. Their march westward slowed, then stopped entirely. How could they rush through such a place? Their hands, which had been calloused by the mountain paths, now reached out to touch the smooth bark of the beeches and the soft moss on the ancient oaks. They did not simply camp, they began to weave. Using supple branches and broad leaves, they constructed shelters that seemed to grow from the forest floor itself, temporary homes that honored the woods rather than conquering them. And they sang. Their voices, once raised in songs of journeying, now wove melodies that echoed the rustle of leaves and the gentle creak of the trees, a language of pure appreciation for the beauty they had found. This pause was not born of defiance, but of a deep, resonant love. Their chieftain, watching his people find a profound peace they had not felt since the shores of Cuiviénen, made a fateful choice. He would not force them to march. He understood that their spirit, their very essence, was being nourished by this forest in a way the distant promise of Valinor could not yet match. He chose to honor the hearts of his people over the relentless demand of the journey, a decision that valued their immediate joy and connection. Yet this beautiful delay came with a cost. Every day spent in the dappled light of the green Wood was a day the other kindreds, the Vanyar and the Noldor, drew further ahead. A subtle tension began to grow among the Teleri, a quiet conflict between the tangible paradise around them and the celestial one they were pledged to find. Was this deep, earthbound love a betrayal of their higher calling, or was this forest, in its own way, a part of that destiny? The stakes of their lingering were immense. By choosing to embrace the mortal lands of Middle-earth so completely, they risked being left behind forever, their connection to the other Eldar stretched thin by distance and diverging experience. Their love for the world was becoming their anchor, even as it threatened to become their chain. While the Teleri tarried, enchanted by the song of the trees, the Vanyar and the Noldor pressed onward, their path leading them out of the woods and toward a new, unimaginable shore. The Vanyar and the Noldor finally stood upon the western shore, their long journey ending at the edge of an endless, roaring expanse. The great sea was a sight beyond their comprehension, a moving, breathing plain of water that stretched to the very edge of the sky. It was the final, most formidable barrier, and it demanded a new kind of courage. The valor did not simply carry them across. Instead, they taught them the art of shipbuilding, a profound act of trust. The elves learned to shape wood with their own hands, to weave sails that could catch the wind, to craft vessels that were both a prayer and a promise. This was not a passive waiting for rescue, but an active partnership in their own destiny, a leap of faith made tangible in every plank and rope. Can you imagine the mixture of terror and awe as they pushed those first ships into the surf, entrusting their entire future to the mercy of the waves? Some looked back, their eyes tracing the fading line of the coast, their hearts holding a quiet ache for the familiar woods and starlit hills of Middle-earth. It was a bittersweet farewell, a necessary loss for a promised gain. The decision to set sail was the ultimate surrender, a choice to place their hope in a power greater than their own understanding. The stakes of that voyage were the very definition of their existence. To succeed was to reach a paradise of light. To fail was to be lost to the deep, forever separated from all they had ever known. Their arrival in Valinor was a transformation. They stepped onto shores bathed in the blended silver and gold of the two trees, a light so pure it felt like the first true dawn of the world. Here, in this land of eternal bliss, their spirits and their crafts flourished beyond anything they could have conceived in the dim forests of their origin. They built cities of pearl and crystal. They composed music that held the echoes of creation itself, and their knowledge grew to encompass the deepest mysteries of the world. Yet this unparalleled blessing came with a profound and permanent cost. The sea now stretched between them and the Teleri, who lingered in the forests, and the Avari, who had refused the mountains. The unity of their people was fractured by geography and by experience, a separation that would deepen with the passing of every age. In Valinor, the elves would create wonders beyond imagining, yet shadow soon approached. Yet the Teleri were not left behind forever. A great island was anchored in the Bay of Valinor, and upon it, the Valor transported those who had finally answered the call, bringing them across the sea to dwell within sight of the blessed realm. Their love for the water remained, and they became the Falathrim, the elves of the shore, building their homes not of stone, but of pearl and silver, and learning the craft of shipbuilding until their white vessels were the swiftest and most beautiful in all the world. They sang songs of the sea, their voices a counterpoint to the roaring waves, their hearts forever divided between the love of the land and the call of the deep. Their separation from the other elves was now a matter of choice and craft, a peaceful divergence that enriched the tapestry of elvenkind. Meanwhile, the Noldor turned their minds and hands to the earth itself. In the hill of Tuna, they raised the white city of Tirion, a vision of crystal and marble that caught the light of the two trees and shone with a soft, internal radiance. This was no simple gathering of shelters. It was an act of profound creation, a testament to their boundless skill and ambition. They quarried stone with a reverence that felt like a conversation with the bones of the world, and they planted gardens that were living tapestries of color and scent, each leaf and blossom placed with artistic intent. Tirion became a living center of elven culture, its soaring towers a testament to their mastery of form and light, its libraries filled with the accumulated lore of their people. Their society was elevated to a brilliance never before seen, a golden age of art and knowledge. Yet within this splendor, a subtle conflict began to stir. The very act of creation, so magnificent and empowering, carried a hidden cost. Their pride in their own works, in the beautiful city they had built from nothing, began to grow deep roots. It was a quiet pride, born from the joy of making, but it held the potential to overshadow the humble wonder they had once felt as children of Starlight. The Noldor made a conscious decision to focus their entire society on the mastery of arts and lore, to push the boundaries of what was possible. This choice fueled their greatest achievements, the forging of legendary gems and the composing of epic poems, but it also planted the seeds of a future folly. The stakes of their flourishing were immense. With every jewel they cut and every tower they raised, they became more powerful, more luminous, and more distinct from the other elves. This very greatness made them more visible, and in the luminous peace of Valinor, such a brilliant light could not help but attract a gaze that was not entirely benevolent. Their accomplishments made them susceptible to a new kind of shadow, one born not of darkness, but of envy and a hunger for the works of their hands. Amid this splendor, a shadow of discontent began to stir within the Noldor's ranks. The greatest of the Noldor was a prince named Fëanor, whose spirit burned with a creative fire that could craft wonders beyond any other. His ultimate masterpiece was the creation of 3 jewels, the Silmarils. These were not simple gems. He captured the living light of the 2 trees of Valinor within them, a feat so profound that even the Valar marveled. The jewels shone with a sacred radiance, a light so pure that no mortal or evil hands could ever touch them without being seared. In their flawless surfaces, the fate of Valinor itself became sealed. Fëanor's love for his creation, however, twisted into a prideful and possessive obsession. He saw the Silmarils not as a gift to the world, but as his and his alone, the ultimate expression of his own genius. When the Valar, the guardians of the world, asked him to surrender the jewels to help heal a growing sickness in the trees, he refused. This single act of defiance created a schism that cracked the very foundation of paradise. It was a conflict of wills, the authority of the gods set against the unyielding pride of the greatest of the elves. This tension festered, creating factions among the Noldor and turning their luminous city into a place of whispers and suspicion. Then the shadow struck. The great enemy, Melkor, whom the elves called Morgoth, the black foe of the world, had long plotted in the dark. He craved the Silmarils, and in his malice, he found an ally in the giant spider, Ungoliant. Together, they unleashed a terrible darkness upon Valinor. The two trees were poisoned, their light extinguished forever, plunging the blessed realm into a darkness it had never known. In the ensuing chaos, Morgoth stole the Silmarils and fled, leaving behind a land of grief and a people shattered. For Fëanor, this was not just a theft. It was a violation that consumed his very soul. In a hall of his father, before his 7 sons and many of his people, he made a choice that would curse his lineage for ages. He swore a terrible and unbreakable oath, vowing to pursue any being, Vala, elf, or man, who dared to keep a Silmaril from his house. This was not a vow of justice, but one of vengeance and possession, a fire that would burn all who came near it. The stakes of this oath were cosmic. It transformed a personal loss into a catalyst for exile and endless war. Fëanor's decision to lead the Noldor out of Valinor in pursuit of Morgoth was an act of rebellion that sundered them from the gods and from their own kin. They were now a people driven by oath and rage, and their path led them back to the very continent they had once journeyed from, a land that would become the stage for their long and sorrowful war. The rebellion of the Noldor began not with a march, but with a theft. Fëanor needed ships to cross the sea, and he knew the Teleri, who had become the master shipwrights of Valinor, would never grant them. So he demanded their beautiful white vessels, and when they refused, his followers drew their swords. The first blood ever spilled by elven hands was not against the dark enemy, but against their own kin. The sands of Alqualondë were stained that day, and the music of the sea was replaced by the terrible clash of steel and the cries of the fallen. This was the kinslaying, a sin so profound it echoed through the very foundations of the world. For many of the Noldor, the horror of that moment was a cold awakening. They stood frozen, their righteous anger at Morgoth suddenly twisted into a shame they could scarcely comprehend. How could a quest born from a desire for justice begin with such an atrocity? A deep and painful schism tore through the host, right there on the shore. Some, heartsick with guilt, turned back, choosing the judgment of the valor over a path paved with the blood of their cousins. But a great many, their minds clouded by Fëanor's fiery rhetoric and the weight of his terrible oath, made a fateful choice. They boarded the stolen ships, their hands stained, their hearts heavy with a shadow that would never fully leave them. The stakes of their flight were no longer about reclaiming jewels, but about the survival of their very spirits in the face of a self-inflicted curse. Their journey was immediately cursed. The Valor placed a doom upon them, foretelling that their path would lead only to treachery and sorrow, and so it did. Fëanor, in his consuming impatience, committed a second, more personal betrayal. Once across the sea, he abandoned the larger part of his following on the far shore, commanding his sons to burn the very ships that had carried them. The flames lit the night sky, a signal of utter rejection to those left behind. Now, stranded and betrayed, the main host of the Noldor faced a terrible decision. To return was impossible, to go forward seemed suicidal, yet they pressed on, driven by a grim determination that had hardened into destiny. Their only path lay north, to the grinding ice of the Helcaraxa. The northern ice was a world of screaming wind and shifting, groaning flows. This was the Helcaraxa, a bridge of grinding chaos between the blessed realm and the mortal lands, a place where the very air was a weapon. Abandoned by Fëanor and his kin, the main host of the Noldor now faced a choice that held no hope, only varying shades of despair. They could perish on that desolate shore, or they could dare the ice. Their leaders looked upon their people, their faces etched with the horror of the kinslaying and the bitter sting of betrayal, and made the only decision left to them. They would cross. It was an act not of hope, but of a grim, unyielding will to survive, a testament to a spirit that refused to be extinguished even when all light seemed gone. Every step onto that treacherous expanse was a battle fought with their own bodies and minds. The cold was a constant, gnawing presence, a force that sought to leach the very warmth of life from their limbs. They moved in tight groups, the strong supporting the weak, their hands constantly reaching out to steady a slipping comrade on a glassy ledge. There were no grand speeches, only the quiet, desperate acts of care that became their true language. A shared scrap of whey bread, a protective arm around someone succumbing to exhaustion, a song whispered against the gale to remind them of a world that once knew trees and soft grass. These small gestures were the only light in that endless white, a fragile defiance against the crushing indifference of the ice, but the Helcaraxa demanded its price. The ice was not a static path, but a living, shifting maze. Without warning, a chasm would yawn open, swallowing friends and family into a frigid, black depth. Others simply fell, their strength spent, their bodies becoming still monuments to the journey's cost. The loss was a constant, silent companion, a grief so profound it threatened to freeze their hearts more completely than any wind. The internal conflict was a relentless whisper in every mind. Was this relentless suffering a punishment for their rebellion? Was there any land left to reach, or were they marching into an endless void? The decision to place one foot in front of the other, hour after hour, day after unimaginable day, became the ultimate expression of their courage. The stakes were the most fundamental possible, the survival of their people and the preservation of their very identity against an environment designed to erase them. They were being stripped of all vanity, all the pride of Tirion, forged in this crucible of ice into something harder, sharper, and bound together by a shared sorrow that would mark them for all time. When the first scouts finally glimpsed the faint, dark line of a shore ahead, it was not with joy, but with a numb, weary recognition. They had endured the unendurable. The host that stumbled onto the rocky coasts of Middle-earth was a ghost of its former self, its numbers grievously diminished, its spirit scarred by loss. Yet they had crossed, they had chosen to live, and in that choice, they had forged a legacy of resilience that would become the core of their history in exile. They emerged from the ice not as the radiant lords of Valinor, but as hardened survivors, their innocence forever lost on the grinding flows. And the land they now entered was a realm already falling under the long shadow of Morgoth, the very enemy they had crossed a world and an age of ice to confront. The grinding ice had forged them into a people of hardened will. Upon the shores of Middle-earth, the Noldor faced a land already shrouded in the gloom of Morgoth's dominion. Their first priority was survival, but their oath demanded war. This conflict began not with a grand charge, but with careful, deliberate steps to build trust. The Sindar, the grey elves who had long dwelled in Beleriand, regarded these newcomers with deep suspicion. Whispers of the kinslaying at Alqualanda had traveled far, carried on the wind and water, painting the Noldor as a dangerous, violent people. The Noldor kings understood that their first battle would be one of diplomacy, a campaign to prove their worth as allies, not conquerors. They offered their superior knowledge of craft and warfare, not as a demand, but as a gift, a shared defense against the common enemy that threatened all elvenkind. This patient work of alliance building was their truest strategy, mending the frayed edges of their people's honor with every act of courage and every promise kept. When Morgoth's forces finally poured from the north, a tide of orcs and twisted creatures, the alliance was put to the ultimate test. The battle under stars, as it would be remembered, was a chaotic, swirling melee fought in the dim light of the constellations. The Noldor, with their bright, keen blades and disciplined formations, met the disorganized horde with a ferocity the world had never seen. Yet their true strength lay not in their individual skill, but in their coordination with the Sindar. The Grey Elves, knowing every hidden path and secret glen of their land, guided the Noldor hosts, allowing them to strike from unexpected directions and trap the enemy forces. This was a new kind of warfare for Beleriand, a fusion of raw power and intimate knowledge of the land. The victory was decisive, scattering Morgoth's armies and securing the northern lands for the elves. It was a moment of profound relief, a proof that the shadow could be held back, but it was a victory paid for in sacrifice and sealed by a fragile, hard-won trust. In the wake of this triumph, the Noldor kings faced a critical choice. The path of relentless pursuit, the fiery road that had led them from Valinor, was now closed. Morgoth had retreated behind the immense, fortified mountains of Thangorodrim, a bastion of sheer power that no army could assault, so they chose a different path, one of permanence and patience. They decided to build, across Beleriand, from the hidden city of Menigroth to the highlands of Dorthonion. They raised their own realms, not as temporary camps, but as enduring kingdoms. They carved fortresses into the mountainsides, wove magic into the foundations of their towers, and established borders that would stand for centuries. This decision to shift from a war of pursuit to a long defense fundamentally altered their fate. They were no longer just exiles seeking vengeance. They were now lords and guardians of a land, their identities intertwined with the stones and rivers of Middle-earth. This very success, however, raised the stakes to a terrifying new height. Their glittering cities and powerful realms were a direct challenge to Morgoth's dominion, a light that his darkness could not tolerate. Their presence had permanently altered the balance of power in Beleriand, and in doing so, they had drawn his greater, more calculating wrath. He would no longer send forth simple hordes of orcs. He would now devise new stratagems, breed new and more terrible monsters, and seek to corrupt from within. The elves had won a battle, but they had also committed themselves to a long, grinding war against an enemy whose malice was as deep as the foundations of the world. In the peace that followed, the elves built hidden cities and guarded their borders with a vigilance that was both their strength and their cage, their eyes ever turned toward the dark north, waiting for the shadow to stir once more. Within the encircling mountains, a secret was taking shape. The elf king Turgon, guided by a divine vision, led his people to a secluded valley, utterly hidden from the world. Here, Far from the open war against Morgoth, he directed the construction of a city meant to be a perfect sanctuary. The Noldor poured all their remaining art and power into its making. They raised white towers that pierced the sky, paved streets with polished stone that gleamed like pearls, and cultivated gardens where fountains sang day and night. This was Gondolin, the hidden rock, a bastion of elven culture preserved in a state of grace, its very existence a defiance of the shadow that lay over the land. The consequence of this immense undertaking was a realm of unparalleled beauty and strength, a last pure echo of the glory of Valinor itself, but this splendor came at a profound cost. The tension of their secrecy was a constant, quiet weight upon every inhabitant. They lived in a gilded cage of their own making, surrounded by unimaginable beauty, yet cut off from the wider world, from their allies, and even from news of the war. Every stranger seen in the distant hills, every unusual sound echoing from the mountains, was a potential herald of doom. This isolation bred a unique kind of fear, the terror of being found. To protect his creation, Turgon made a fateful and absolute decision. He forbade anyone from leaving the hidden valley and decreed that no one could ever reveal the city's location. This choice was born of a leader's desperate need to safeguard his people, but it also cultivated a deep and dangerous pride. Within their perfect walls, the Gondolindrim began to believe in their own invincibility, their separation from the struggles of others, fostering a sense of superiority. The stakes of this hidden existence were the preservation of the last unsullied Noldor kingdom. Its secrecy was its greatest armor, but that very quality meant that its potential fall would be all the more catastrophic. A perfect light extinguished in the most absolute darkness. Yet, even in this most secret of kingdoms, the seeds of betrayal were sown by a mortal man's arrival. In the shadowed halls of Menigroth, a love bloomed that would challenge the very foundations of fate. The elf maiden Luthien, daughter of King Thingol, possessed a beauty and power that was not of war, but of song and spirit. Her voice could unravel stone and lull the world to sleep. And it was a mortal man, Beren, who witnessed this power and loved her, a wanderer from a race whose lives were as brief as candle flames, next to the enduring light of the elves. Their union seemed impossible, a crossing of a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. In his disapproval, King Thingol set a bride price of impossible cruelty. Beren must venture into the very heart of the enemy's fortress and bring back a Silmaril from Morgoth's iron crown. This was not a challenge, but a sentence of certain death, a king's hope that the mortal would simply vanish into the darkness and be forgotten. Yet Beren accepted. His decision was not one of pride, but of a love so profound that even a fool's quest was preferable to a life without her light. For Luthien, her father's decree created a painful schism between her duty and her heart. She could have remained in the safety of her forest realm, allowing the mortal to fulfill his doomed fate. Instead, she chose to follow. This was the first of her great choices, a defiance of royal command and elven custom, for a love that her people could not comprehend. The stakes were the integrity of their very souls, a mortal and an immortal choosing to walk into the deepest shadow together, their bond the only shield against a despair that had consumed greater kingdoms. Their quest was a tapestry of desperation and wonder. They faced the monstrous wolf Carcharoth, the guardian of Morgoth's gate, a creature of pure malice. They stood in the pits of Angband, where the air was thick with fear and the shadows had claws. And there, in the deepest dark, Luthien did not draw a blade. She sang. Her song was a weapon of pure essence, a lullaby of such ancient power that it enchanted Morgoth himself, the Dark Lord, and his entire court into a deep, unnatural slumber. This was the power of love made manifest, not as a gentle feeling, but as an active, world-altering force. While the enemy slept, Beren the Mortal did the impossible. With a knife, he carefully cut a single, radiant silmaril from the Iron Crown. Their success was a moment of breathtaking triumph, a flicker of pure light stolen from the heart of absolute night. But the escape carried a terrible cost. The awakened wolf Karcharoth attacked, and in the struggle, Beren's hand, which held the holy jewel, was bitten off and swallowed. They returned to Thingol's court, not in glory, but in sorrow, the silmaril lost within the beast's belly, and Beren mortally wounded. He fulfilled the quest, but paid with his life. Luthien's heart did not break with grief, it transformed it. Faced with his loss, she made her ultimate choice. She laid down her own life, following his spirit to the silent halls of waiting. There she did not plead, she sang once more. Her song, born of a love that had faced down the Dark Lord, was so profoundly beautiful and full of sorrow that it moved the guardian of the dead himself. He granted them a unique and unprecedented fate, a second life together as mortals. Luthien Tinuvil chose a mortal doom, forsaking the eternal life of her people to share a single, fleeting lifetime with the man she loved. This decision transcended all elven lore, creating a new path in the music of the world. The stakes of their story were the highest conceivable, pitting the fragile power of love against the machinery of doom itself. Their legend became a beacon, a whispered song of hope that would inspire both elves and men in the terrible wars yet to come. That fragile alliance of elves and men was tested in the fires of the Nirneath Arnodiad, the battle of unnumbered tears. It was to be the great union, the combined might of the Noldor kingdoms, the Sindar, and the Edain, the noble houses of men, all marching together under a single banner of hope to break the siege of Morgoth forever. The coordination of these diverse armies was a marvel in itself, a tapestry of different strengths, woven into a single strategy. Elven archers provided a hail of precise arrows, dwarven axes formed an unbreakable wall of steel, and the cavalry of men charged with a ferocity that shook the very ground. For a moment, it seemed that their collective courage might actually turn the tide of the long war, yet the conflict's tension was magnified not by the enemy at the gates, but by a betrayal woven deep within their own ranks. The elven leaders had chosen to place their trust in a specific house of men, believing their loyalty to be unshakable. This decision, born of strategic necessity, brought both the battle's most shining heroism and its most profound disaster. At the critical hour, that trusted house turned traitor, abandoning the allied lines and attacking their own kin from the rear. The orderly battle lines dissolved into chaos, the great strategy crumbling into a desperate, bloody struggle for survival. The consequences of that treachery were catastrophic. The field was lost, and with it, the flower of elven and Edain strength was cut down. The defeat was so complete, so devastating, that it earned its mournful name, for there were none left to count the tears of the fallen. This shattered the military power of the elves in Beliri and beyond repair. The trust between the free peoples was broken, a wound that would never fully heal, and the long, slow decline of the elven kingdoms began in earnest. The stakes of that single day were nothing less than the survival of Beleriand itself, and the defeat forced a painful, final retreat. In the aftermath, the elves sought refuge in their last hidden havens, their hope fading. The hidden city's location, guarded for centuries, was at last betrayed by one of its own. A carefully nurtured jealousy and Morgoth's whispered promises turned a prince's heart, leading the dark host through the secret mountain passes. The first warning the people of Gondolin had was the sight of enemy banners at the gates, a tide of fire and steel flooding their pristine valley. Their long-cherished secrecy was shattered in a single, brutal moment. What followed was not a battle, but a desperate, house-by-house defense. A beautiful city becoming a charnel ground as its people fought with the grace of desperation. The conflict was a tragic tapestry woven from external assault and the bitter thread of internal treachery, a combination that made the downfall feel both shocking and inevitable. King Turgon, who had built this sanctuary as a perfect refuge, now faced his most terrible choice. He could command a futile, final charge to reclaim the city, or he could ensure that a remnant of his people lived on. On the highest tower, watching his white streets run red, he made his decision. He would stand. He ordered his captains to gather the survivors, the women, the children, and any who could still carry a sword, and break through the enemy lines. He himself would remain, a king in his hall, drawing the wrath of the enemy to give the escapees a chance. This sacrifice was the ultimate embodiment of elven nobility in the face of utter defeat, a leader choosing the legacy of his people over his own life. The stakes of that day were the extinction of the last great Noldor stronghold, the final echo of Valinor in Middle-earth. Its fall, wreathed in flame and smoke, signaled the undeniable end of their dominance in Beleriand. The survivors fled through a secret tunnel, their hearts as broken as their city, carrying with them the legacy of their lost home and a fragile spark of future hope. From the ashes of fallen kingdoms, a single ship was built. Its captain was not a king of the Noldor, but a mariner named Eärendil, whose blood was a mingling of elf and man. He carried with him a burden of light, the last Silmaril, retrieved from the belly of the wolf. His heart was heavy with the sorrows of all Middle-earth, a land suffocating under the shadow of its enemy. The path he chose was one of ultimate risk, for he sought to sail into the uttermost west, to the forbidden shores of Valinor, and there plead for mercy before the thrones of the gods themselves. This was a direct challenge to the ban of the Valor, a trespass that could bring divine wrath upon his head. The tension was a quiet, desperate thing, a conflict between the despair of a dying world and the fragile, stubborn hope that one voice could still change its fate. His decision to raise the sails was an act of faith that dwarfed all others. He was turning his back on the known world of conflict and grief, venturing into a sea of myth and legend, trusting that the justice of the Valor was greater than their anger. The stakes of his voyage were the lives of every free being left in Middle-earth. Should he fail, all would be lost to an endless night. Should he succeed, he knew the world he loved would be irrevocably changed. His ship, Vingalot, was borne on winds of destiny, crossing the shadowy seas and passing the enchanted isles that guarded the way, until at last he beached his vessel on the immortal shore. He did not come as a conqueror or a rebel, but as a supplicant, a husband and father, pleading for his family and for all those he had left behind. His words were not of pride or vengeance, but of a profound and simple need. He asked for pity, he asked for help, and the Valar listened. Moved by his courage and the purity of his plea, they set aside their wrath. The Silmaril upon his brow, a light reclaimed from the darkness, was the sign of his honest heart. The consequence of his bravery was cataclysmic. The Valar unleashed their full power, marching forth in a host of unimaginable majesty to make war upon Morgoth. The War of Wrath was not a battle, but a remaking of the world. Mountains were thrown down, and seas rushed in to drown entire regions. The very land of Beleriand, the stage for so many elven sorrows and triumphs, was broken and sank beneath the waves. In that final conflict, Morgoth was at last cast out, chained, and hurled through the door of night into the timeless void. His dominion ended forever. Eärendil's success was the deliverance all had prayed for, yet it carried the bittersweet weight of an ending. The age of the elves in Middle-earth, an age of glorious and tragic kingdoms, was over. The world had been saved, but it was a new world, one that felt smaller, less magical. With the great enemy gone, the long exile of the Noldor was lifted. The Valar offered them a choice, a pardon, and a passage back to the west. This invitation extended to all elves, a call to leave the mortal lands and come to the undying realm, to heal and to live in peace. The shadow was gone, but so was the reason for many to remain. Yet from the world's ruin, a new question arose for the children of Eärendil and Elwing. Their twin sons, Elrond and Elros, stood at a crossroads no others had ever faced, their very blood a harmony of two distinct themes in the music of the world. They were the half-elven, and the Valar gave them a choice that was both a gift and a sorrow. They could join the kindred of their elven kin, accepting the immortal life and the long memory that stretched into the endless years. Or they could embrace the fate of their mortal ancestors, the gift of men, a life of brief, brilliant flame, followed by a departure from the circles of the world. This was not a simple preference, but a decision about the very nature of their soul, a conflict between two profound and beautiful destinies. Their deliberations were a quiet, internal struggle, a weighing of an eternity of remembrance against a single lifetime of passionate, focused meaning. The tension between the brothers was not one of rivalry, but of a shared, profound understanding that their paths must diverge. Their unity as twins would be broken by a choice that would define all the ages to come. When the moment arrived, Elros made his decision. He looked upon the world of men and saw not limitation, but potential. He chose mortality, and with that choice, he was granted a life of 500 years to found a great kingdom. He became Tar Minneatar, the first king of Numenor, a gifted island realm raised from the sea for the Edain, the faithful men who had stood with the elves. His choice anchored his lineage in the world of change and death, setting the stage for the rise and fall of one of the greatest civilizations of men. Elrond, his brother, looked into the same future and saw a different calling. His heart was bound to the long tales, the ancient songs, and the preservation of all that was fair and noble from the first age. He chose the life of the Eldar, becoming an immortal lore master and a keeper of wisdom. His choice was a vow to remember, to guide, and to stand as a bridge between the fading past and the unknown future. This poignant division was not a true separation, but a fulfillment, each brother accepting a different aspect of their shared heritage. The stakes of their choice shaped the fate of Middle-earth itself, weaving the lines of elves and men into a single, complex tapestry for all time. As the Second Age dawned, Elrond would become a guardian of memory in a changing world. Elrond's choice of immortality bound him to the long memory of the world, and with the rise of a new shadow, he knew a sanctuary was needed. He journeyed to a deep valley where the river Loudwater carved its way between steep, pine-clad cliffs, a place of waterfalls and perpetual twilight. Here, he felt the subtle power of the elven ring Vilya, the mightiest of the three, amplify the natural peace of the land. His decision was not to build a fortress of stone and steel, but a refuge of spirit and memory. He wove the ring's power not for domination, but for protection and healing, creating a hidden realm where the air itself seemed to slow the passage of time and ease the burdens of the heart. The consequence of this choice was Imladris, which men would call Rivendell, a haven where the weary could find rest and the lost could find guidance. It became a living library of the elder days, its halls filled with the soft sound of elven song and the quiet turning of ancient pages. Yet this peaceful endeavor was framed by a constant, external threat. Sauron, the new Dark Lord, grew in power in the land of Mordor, his shadow stretching across Middle-earth, seeking to extinguish all such places of light. The very existence of Rivendell was an act of defiance, its secrecy its greatest defense against the eye that searched for it. The internal conflict was a quiet, ceaseless effort to preserve hope itself, to keep the flame of knowledge and beauty alive in an age increasingly dominated by fear and conflict. Elrond's decision to use his power for preservation rather than war made his house a beacon. It became a council house for the free peoples, a place where elves, dwarves, and the few faithful men could meet and plan in safety. The stakes of Rivendell's survival were the preservation of elven culture and all that remained uncorrupted from the First Age. Its fall would mean the loss of the last great repository of wisdom in the northern lands, a critical stronghold for any future resistance against the darkness. Here, in this hidden valley, the tales of the elder days were kept alive for those who would listen. The shadow of Mordor grew long, a darkness that threatened to choke the very skies of Middle-earth. In this desperate hour, the High King of the Elves, Gil-galad, and the High King of the Dunedain, Elendil, made a choice that echoed the great alliances of the elder days. They would not wait for the darkness to come to them. They gathered their hosts, the last gleaming armies of the Noldor, and the proud, strong men of Numenor, and marched directly to the black gates of the enemy. This was the last alliance, a final, defiant stand against the rising tide of evil. The journey itself was a testament to their fragile unity, a long and difficult march that tested the endurance of both peoples, forcing them to rely on one another in a way they had not for many long years. The siege of Barad-dûr was not a swift battle, but a grinding war of attrition that lasted for years. The forces of Sauron seemed endless, a constant onslaught of orcs and worse things that tested the very limits of their courage. The air was thick with the smoke of battle, and the ground trembled with the clash of steel, In the final, terrible confrontation, upon the slopes of Mount Doom, the two kings faced Sauron himself. It was a struggle of titans, a conflict that would decide the fate of the world. Gil-galad, the Elven king, and Eärendil, the king of men, fought with a valor that has become legend, but the Dark Lord's power was immense. In the end, both kings fell, their lives spent to bring Sauron low. Elendil's son, Isildur, took up the hilt shard of his father's broken sword and cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. The Dark Lord was defeated, his form broken and his spirit scattered. Victory was achieved, but at a cost that would resonate for ages. The One Ring, the very source of Sauron's power, was not cast into the fires from which it was made. Isildur, swayed by its treacherous beauty, claimed it as a weregild for his father and brother. This single decision, made in a moment of grief and temptation, left the victory incomplete. Sauron was gone, but his greatest weapon survived, a seed of darkness that would one day grow again. The stakes of this war were the ultimate freedom of Middle-earth, and while that freedom was won, it was a bittersweet triumph. The last alliance marked the end of an era. The elves had poured the last of their strength into that war, and with the fall of Gil-galad, their power in Middle-earth was irrevocably diminished. The age of elven dominance was over, and the time of men had truly begun. In the long, quiet peace that followed, a subtle change came over the elves who remained. They began to feel the slow weight of the passing years, a weariness that no rest in Middle-earth could ease. The call of the sea grew stronger in their hearts, a longing for the undying lands that whispered to them in the rustling of leaves and the sighing of the wind. 3 elven rings, crafted not for war but for preservation, now held back the long tide of time. Their bearers, Elrond, Galadriel, and Sundering, made a quiet, deliberate choice. They would not wield these tools for conquest or dominion, but to create sanctuaries where the memory of the elder days might linger a little longer. In the hidden valley of Rivendell, Elrond used the power of Vilya to weave an air of peace and reflection, a place where the past remained vivid and clear. In the golden wood of Lothlorien, Galadriel nurtured a realm where the leaves did not wither and the years seemed to slow, a living dream of ancient beauty. And at the Grey Havens, Sundering the shipwright maintained the final refuge, a serene port from which the weary could begin the last journey to the west. These were acts of profound love, a gentle resistance against the world's inevitable decay. The consequence was a series of havens, islands of grace, where the heart could find rest and the spirit could heal, protected from the weariness that now afflicted the wider lands of Middle-earth. Yet this beautiful defiance came with a hidden and terrible vulnerability. The power of the 3 was inextricably linked to the fate of the One Ring, the Master Ring forged in secret by Sauron. Their preservation was a borrowed power, a delicate enchantment that existed only so long as the One Ring was lost and its master powerless. This created a constant, quiet tension beneath the surface of their timeless realms. The elven ring-bearers had chosen to accept this risk, to build their refuges on a foundation that could be shattered in an instant. Their decision prolonged the presence of the elves, granting them centuries of guarded peace, but it came at a subtle spiritual cost. It anchored them to a fading world, their own light sustained by an art that was ultimately tied to the enemy's design. The stakes of their choice were the gradual fading of their people. By using the rings, they delayed the inevitable call of the sea and the departure to the undying lands, but they could not stop it. They were cultivating a beautiful twilight, knowing that a deeper night would follow if Sauron ever reclaimed his lost treasure. As the Third Age waned, the shadow in the east began to grow once more, and the fate of the rings and all they preserved became a matter of urgent and terrible consequence. The quiet sanctuary of Rivendell became the stage for the most critical debate of the age. Elrond gathered a council of the free peoples, from the stout dwarves to the wandering men, and even a lone hobbit, Frodo Baggins, who had borne the terrible burden of the One Ring to its doorstep. The air in the circle was thick with conflicting desires and ancient fears. Some argued for using the ring as a weapon, believing its power could be turned against its maker. Others spoke of hiding it away, sealing it in some deep vault beyond even Sauron's reach. Each voice revealed a different facet of the ring's corrosive influence, its ability to twist even the noblest intentions into a craving for control. Elrond did not command, he guided. He allowed each fear and each ambition to be spoken aloud, for only in the clear light of day could such shadows be dispelled. His deep knowledge of lore provided the terrible clarity they all needed. He revealed that the ring could not be used, only mastered by a power greater than Sauron's, and that it could never be hidden, for it would forever call to its master and corrupt all that was near it. There was only one path, one perilous and nearly impossible choice. The ring must be unmade in the very fires where it was forged, in the heart of Mount Doom, deep within the land of the enemy. This decision was a collective act of immense courage, a choice to embrace a fragile hope over the seductive lure of power. It meant accepting that the only way to defeat the darkness was not through greater strength, but through its utter rejection. The stakes were nothing less than the survival of every free realm and the end of the Age of Wonder. To fail meant an endless night under the shadow. To succeed would require a miracle, and in that moment of grave resolution, the most unlikely of answers emerged. The council, led by Elrond's wisdom, chose not a king or a warrior to carry this burden, but the small, resilient hobbit who had already shown a resistance to the ring's call. It was a decision that trusted in the power of humble courage over martial might, a final, beautiful expression of elven wisdom guiding the fate of the world. With the quest of the ring now set upon its irrevocable path, the elves themselves prepared for their final acts in the long story of Middle-earth. The Grey Havens was a place of silver mists and quiet goodbyes. One by one, the great white ships were made ready, their sails furled like the folded wings of seabirds. For many elves, the choice to board was the culmination of a long internal conflict, a balance between a deep love for the forests and mountains of Middle-earth and an irresistible pull from across the sea, a call that had become a physical ache in their hearts. Some lingered for years near the shore, walking in the woods of Lindon one last time, tracing the familiar patterns of the stars through the branches. Others, their duty to the remaining free peoples finally fulfilled, knew their time had come and went aboard with a quiet resolve, their faces a mask of serene sorrow. Each departure was a personal decision, a final act of letting go that diminished the world's store of beauty and ancient memory. The air at the havens was thick with unspoken words, with the gentle touch of hands and the soft sound of elven tongues speaking names that would not be heard in those lands again. This was not a retreat, but a graceful surrender to a changing world. Their leaving ensured that the age of men could truly begin, unshadowed by the longer, wiser presence of the firstborn. It was a necessary end, but it carried the weight of an immense cultural loss, as if the colors of the world were slowly fading to sepia. The last lights of the Eldar were going out, and the magic they had woven into the very fabric of the hills and streams would slowly unravel with their absence. Yet, in the twilight of their time, the elves would aid the ring-bearer one last time. While the ring-bearer journeyed south in secret, the lands of Middle-earth erupted in open war. Elven forces, though diminished, made a critical choice to engage the enemy directly. From the golden woods of Lothlorien, Galadriel's archers defended their borders against repeated assaults from Dol Guldur, their arrows a swift, silver rain against the encroaching shadow. From the hidden valley of Rivendell, companies of elven warriors marched to the aid of men in the north, fighting shoulder to shoulder with the rangers of the north to protect lands that had long been their home. These were not battles of conquest, but of deliberate diversion. Every orc host that broke upon the borders of Lorien, every skirmish that drew the eye of Sauron away from the lonely path to Mordor, was a carefully calculated sacrifice. The conflict was a desperate holding action, a fight against overwhelming numbers where the true victory was not in holding ground, but in buying a single, precious hour for the quest. Each life given was a conscious offering for a future these elves would not live to see, their valor a final, brilliant echo of the great alliances of old. The decision by Elrond and Galadriel to commit their people to this war was one of profound moral weight. They knew their strength was fading, that every warrior lost was a light extinguished from their already dwindling numbers. Yet they chose to fight, honoring ancient bonds of friendship and a shared hope for the world they would soon leave behind. This was not the fiery rebellion of the Noldor in the First Age, but a somber, necessary duty. The stakes of their participation were the success of the quest itself. Without their valiant stands, Sauron's full attention would have found the ring-bearer, and all would have been lost. Their sacrifice secured the fragile thread of hope, but it came at a profound cost, accelerating the departure of their kind from the shores of Middle-earth. With Sauron's fall, the elves' purpose in Middle-earth was fulfilled, and their exodus began in earnest. Yet even with the shadow gone, a final task of healing remained. The war had left scars upon the Shire, its green fields trampled, and its beloved trees felled. It was then that a company of travelers returned, and among them were elves, their presence a quiet balm to the wounded land. They did not come with armies or proclamations, but with simple tools and a profound understanding of the earth's own song. Led by the wisdom of Gandalf, they walked the despoiled fields, and where their hands touched the soil, life surged forth with renewed vigor. They worked not with loud spells, but with a gentle magic that whispered to the seeds sleeping in the ground, encouraging them to awaken. Their actions were a living lesson to the hobbits, a demonstration of how to mend what had been broken through patience and care rather than force. This choice to linger and help was a final, deliberate gift. The elves knew their time in Middle-earth was measured in days, their hearts already turning toward the sea. This created a beautiful, poignant tension in the air, a mixture of the pure joy of seeing the land restored and the quiet sorrow of an inevitable farewell. Their every act of healing was also an act of letting go, a last embrace of the world they had loved for so many ages. The decision to offer this final assistance was a reflection of their enduring guardianship. It was not a duty demanded of them, but a choice made from a deep, abiding care for the little folk and the simple innocence the Shire represented. The stakes of this quiet work were the preservation of hope itself in the new age to come. By ensuring the Shire could return to its peace and beauty, the elves were safeguarding a living memory of all that was good and worth protecting in Middle-earth. This benevolent act solidified their legendary status, not as distant, mighty kings, but as gentle healers who used their last moments in the mortal world to nurture its future. As the last tasks were completed and the green hills of the Shire shone once more, the elves gathered for their final journey across the sea. The last ship waited at the quay, its white wood glowing softly in the twilight. Elrond, Galadriel, and the other ring-bearers walked slowly up the gangway, their steps silent on the smooth planks. They were not alone. With them went two small figures, the hobbits Frodo and Bilbo, whose wounds from bearing the great burden could find no cure in all the wide lands of Middle-earth. Their boarding was a quiet act, yet it resonated with the weight of an entire age coming to a close. The elves were not fleeing, but fulfilling a promise made long ago, their departure a final, graceful surrender of the world they had helped to shape. This was the true end of their tales, a conscious choice to leave the care of forests and rivers to the hands of men. The internal conflict was a quiet melody of sorrow and acceptance, a heart that held the immense weight of memory while turning toward a peace that could finally ease it. They looked back one last time, their eyes tracing the familiar lines of the coast, the woods where they had danced, and the mountains where their cities had once shone. To stay would be to fade, to become mere whispers in a world that no longer had a place for their full light. The decision to sail was an embrace of their own destiny, and a final gift of healing to the ring-bearers who had sacrificed so much. The stakes of this quiet moment were the completion of a story, thousands of years in the telling. Their leaving was the final note in the great music of the Eldar, a necessary end that allowed the world to move forward into its next chapter, unshadowed by the lingering presence of the firstborn. And so, the seas carried them away, but their songs lingered in the forests and hills, a timeless echo of the beauty that once was. Rivendell in the Fourth Age was a quiet echo of its former self. The fountains still sang their gentle songs, and the libraries held their vast collections of lore, but the halls were no longer filled with the vibrant hum of many voices. A handful of elves remained, their presence a conscious choice to act as the final guardians of a fading world. They tended the gardens with a reverent touch, ensuring that the memory of the place did not crumble into ruin the moment they turned their backs. Their work was not one of grand creation, but of gentle preservation, a long and patient goodbye to a home they had loved for millennia. This created a quiet, melancholic atmosphere, a space suspended between a glorious past and an unknowable future, where every perfectly kept path was also a memorial. The decision to linger was a sacrifice. Each day they stayed, they felt the pull of the sea grow stronger, a call to the peace of the West that was their rightful destiny. Yet they chose to honor their ancient vows, to keep the flame of knowledge lit just a little longer for any who might seek it. The stakes of their vigil were the preservation of history itself. Without their careful stewardship, the tales of the elder days, the languages, the songs, and the wisdom gained through ages of joy and sorrow would dissolve into unremembered dust. Their legacy, therefore, was not in stone or steel, but in the intangible light they passed on to the few wandering dwarves or curious men who still found their way to the hidden valley. These elves became living bridges to a mythic age. They shared stories not of power and conquest, but of beauty, loss, and resilience. A young traveler might hear the lay of Lithien and carry its message of love's power into their own life. A scholar might study an ancient text and find a solution to a modern problem hidden within its lines. In this way, elven culture ceased to be a present force and became a deep, nourishing myth, its beauty and wisdom seeping into the foundations of the new age, inspiring art, governing principles, and a reverence for the natural world. The remaining elves understood that their final, most important role was to become a story. They were curating their own legend, ensuring that when they at last departed, something essential of their spirit would remain. This quiet guardianship of memory was their ultimate gift to Middle-earth, a guiding light left behind for the ages to come. As the stars shone on, the elves' origins remained a whispered legend in the night. A traveler on a forgotten path might catch a melody woven into the rustling leaves, a harmony with no visible singer. Deep in the ancient woods, where sunlight filters through the canopy in soft, green shafts, a sudden shimmer of silver light might dance just at the edge of vision, vanishing when one turns to look. These are the echoes, the faint but enduring impressions the elves left behind in the very substance of the world. As they prepared for their final voyage, they made a conscious choice to weave the essence of their spirit into the forests, rivers, and stones they loved. It was not a spell of power, but a gift of remembrance, a final act of blessing upon Middle-earth. The consequence of this profound offering is a world that is still, in its quietest corners, alive with a whisper of that ancient grace. For a mortal who stumbles upon such a moment, the experience is transformative. It is not fear they feel, but a deep and humbling wonder, a sense that the world is far older and more mysterious than it appears. This fleeting connection to the firstborn inspires stories and songs that are passed down through generations, linking a child listening by a fireside directly to the legendary ages of the elves. Yet these beautiful echoes are engaged in their own quiet conflict. They are memories made manifest, and like all memories, they are locked in a gentle struggle with the relentless march of time. Each passing year sees them grow a little fainter, the melodies a little more distant, as the world changes and forgets. The decision by the elves to imbue nature with their essence was a race against this eventual fading, a way to ensure that even in their absence, their love for the world would not be entirely silenced. The stakes of this gentle decay are the preservation of hope itself in the later ages of the world. So long as a single echo lingers in a sun-dappled glade or a murmuring stream, the legacy of the elves endures, a timeless reminder that even the most profound beauty never truly vanishes. And in the quiet of the evening, the tales of the elves are told anew to those who dream. The storyteller's voice is a soft current beneath the rustling leaves, a gentle guide through the vast tapestry of memory. He does not shout the epic battles or the fall of kingdoms, but instead leans into the quiet moments, the first touch of starlight on water, the hesitant choice to follow a stranger's music. His telling is a careful selection of feeling over fact, a decision to make the ancient journey not just known, but deeply felt. He must balance the immense weight of ages with the fragile human heart, listening in the dark, ensuring the sorrow does not crush and the wonder does not fade into mere fantasy. This is the true tension of his tale, to hold a star in his palm without extinguishing its light. He chooses to speak of the love that moved Amaya to pity, the resilience that survived the grinding ice, and the quiet hope that built a hidden city. These are the threads he weaves, themes of enduring connection that bridge the gap between a mythical past and a present longing for meaning. In doing so, he makes the lore a living, breathing thing, a shared experience under the canopy of night. The stakes of this gentle telling are the soul of the story itself. With every whispered word, he ensures the origins of the elves are not a forgotten scroll in a dusty library, but a vital echo in the hearts of those who hear it, a legacy passed like a secret from one generation to the next. As the final words linger in the air, the tale settles into the listeners like a soft enchantment. The night deepens around the quiet glade, and one by one, the listeners drift into dreams of a far-off lake, where the first elves open their eyes to a sky brimming with unknown stars. And so the final ship vanishes into the mists, a soft light receding on the horizon. In that quiet moment, every story finds its meaning, from the first ripple in the water at Cuiviénen to the last, lingering song at the Grey Havens. This was never a tale of simple departure, but one of a profound and enduring love for the world they helped to shape. The elves did not leave because they stopped caring. They left because they cared enough to let the world change, to allow the age of men to flourish without their overshadowing light. Their entire history was a long lesson in acceptance, a graceful surrender to the turning of the world. Their sacrifice was not in the battles they fought, but in the peace they chose to walk away from, ensuring that their magic would not become a chain binding the future to the past. The legacy they left behind is not carved in stone, but woven into the very air and water. It lives in the resilience of a forest that regrows after a fire, in the quiet hope that stirs a heart facing a great challenge, and in the simple, enduring beauty of a star-filled sky. Their story teaches us that the truest courage is sometimes found in letting go, and that the most powerful magic is a memory that inspires others to build a world worthy of such a song. As the last light of the Eldar fades from these shores, their final gift remains, a quiet whisper in the wind that forever calls us to remember, to cherish, and to protect the wonder in our own world. That quiet peace settles over the listeners like a soft blanket, a gentle understanding that every ending is also a new beginning. We have walked with the elves from their first, wondrous awakening beside the lake, through their great journeys and sorrows, to their final, graceful departure. Their choices, both brilliant and flawed, carved the rivers of history and shaped the very world we know. Their evolution was not a straight path to power, but a winding road of growth, where joy taught them the art of creation and sorrow taught them the deeper strength of resilience. They learned that true wisdom is not found in eternal life alone, but in how that life is lived, in the bonds forged and the beauty preserved against the long night. Though their ships have sailed into the west, their essence was never truly confined to those white vessels. It lingers in the quiet places, in the deep woods that remember their songs and the starlight that once filled their eyes. It lives on in the courage of the small and the humble, in the quiet hope that endures when all seems lost. Their spirit did not vanish. It simply changed form, becoming a watchful presence in the wind and a guiding memory in the hearts of those who cherish the old tales. The story of the elves is a gift passed down through the ages, a timeless reminder that even the most radiant light must eventually fade, not into nothingness, but into a legacy that forever enriches the world.